Good to be here. Always good to be here. Always good to be here, man. Where am I right now? I'm in Pisa in Italy for a couple of days after spending a couple of weeks in the beautiful medieval city of Perugia in Italy. I am in Pisa, a bit north in the Tuscan region. I'm just passing through. So I'll be here for 2 days. Of course, I was here a couple of weeks ago. What? Am I back? Too soon, you know? Well, you know, it was handy for me to be back, and I'm staying a couple of meters away from the Palazzo Blu, where I saw a beautiful exhibition on Futurism a couple of weeks ago. I thought about going to see it again, but I guess, you know. But then I remembered that in the Palazzo Blu, last time I went, I totally forgot to check out their permanent exhibitions. Of course, as a venue, the Palazzo Blu is possibly home to the best of the temporary exhibitions in the city of Pisa. But I completely forgot to check out the permanent exhibitions. But one of the, and I did this time, it was great. Smaller, quite small, but very interesting. But another thing that led me to kind of just go, despite the fact that I'm so busy with work, it's crazy. You know, I'm really, really busy. I'm sleeping very little. Despite that, what really convinced me to go was that they're exhibiting now a new portrait. I don't know whether it was recently discovered or unearthed or just you know, returned to Pisa for one of the first times ever. And since it was made, it's a portrait of Artemisia Gentileschi by Simone Vouet from, I think, 1623 to 1625 circa, around that time frame. I really wanted to see it. Because I'm a big fan of Artemisia Gentileschi. And I'm very excited to be talking about her in this video because obviously I've been talking about male artists in the previous videos. Let's be honest. Art history is full of men who've made art. This is not anyone's fault, but the social rules and regulations that have shaped society until recently. When we look at the history of humanity, you know, women were confined to a specific role that had nothing to do with fame and fortune and ambition and whatever. So it's pretty remarkable to be talking about Artemisia Gentileschi, who's not only considered one of the greatest female artists of the Baroque era. She's considered one of the greatest female artists of the Baroque era, but also one of the greatest artists of the Baroque era. And certainly one of the most contemporary ones. And part of that is because of the feminism of her portraits. I mean, contemporary critics love to point that out, and rightfully so, because I think the best of the works from the older times are the ones that can communicate through art in a timeless sense, so we can connect with them easily. And that's what I really try to look at any work of art that I come across, not just paintings, but also movies, songs, anything. So, right. But for some of you, this might be the first time that you hear about Artemisia Gentileschi, and that's cool. You know, I love to kind of make these videos also because I like to kind of, I like the idea of maybe being the one who introduces these great artists to you guys, whoever is watching. And I'm going to try and talk about her a little bit, but my videos, you understand, I want them to be in and around the 10-minute mark. I don't want them to be too long. It's just really a starting point, so let's see where we go and we'll see what happens. Artemisia Gentileschi was born of the Lomi Gentileschi family in 1593. Like I said, she is one of the greatest painters of the Baroque era, and certainly one of the greatest female artists of the whole art movement period. Her father was Orazio Gentileschi, who was known as a Caravagesque painter, and he was very successful and prominent, especially in the Roman territory. In fact, she was born in Rome. And the Caravagisti, I'm just going to turn, in English I'm just going to say Caravagesque painters. I'm not sure whether that's an accepted term or anything. But that's just a term. The Caravagisti term is used to kind of talk about painters who used a lot of techniques introduced by Michelangelo Merisi in the early part of the Baroque era. And that really defined the Baroque era. So I'm talking about shadow play, diagonal lighting, used for dramatic effects, but also naturalism and just drama, you know. It's a very cinematic style, let me put it that way. So she learned a lot of her trade in the workshop of her father, Orazio. But in 1613, something tragic happened that is often talked about when people talk about her. And it was a tragic event that changed the trajectory of her career and her life in general. She was raped in 1613, and she was raped by a very powerful figure named Agostino Tassi. So she went to Florence. She moved to Florence, and while in Florence, she maintained good relations with prominent figures of the time, including Galileo Galilei. So she was in good company. And eventually she became the first woman to become a member of the Institutional Art Academy of Florence, the Accademia di Arte del Disegno. And she had lots of international clients, and the success that she enjoyed in Florence really set the scene for her return to Rome in 1620. And about 2 years later, Simone Vouet, who was a very prominent French painter in the Roman territory, very close to papal state, worked very close with them, did the portrait that I'll be talking about. But first, the painting that I really want to focus on is a painting that I also saw in the Palazzo Blu, and it's her idealized and allegorical portrait of Cleo, the Muse of History. That's actually what the portrait is called too. That portrait actually didn't come while she was in Rome. It came in 1632, 32, which was 2 years after she moved to Naples, because she actually spent the final part of her life in Naples, and this is a time when she made a lot of her great paintings. So it's cool to be talking about Naples too, because I haven't talked about Naples yet, because really the major artistic centers at the time were Florence and Rome. But Naples was a very wealthy territory in the Italian peninsula at the time, so it did have somewhat of an impact in the art world, including being home to Artemisia Gentileschi. So back to the painting. Cleo, the Muse of History, like I said, is an allegorical and idealized portrait of the Muse of History in Greek mythology. And what we immediately notice is the Baroque techniques, the shadow play, diagonal light, dramatic light effects that are used within the portrait, although they're not used excessively, especially the ones related to the drama, because it's a portrait. So it's not a moving scene. It doesn't have a lot of motion. It's very classical, and even the pose of Cleo is very classical. It's a classical pose, put it like that. Another great thing is that despite the fact that it's a portrait of a very important figure in mythology, it's still it is a portrait of a woman. So for back then, women in portraits tended to be depicted in a very superficial sense, and a lot of the time that superficiality is represented by the clothes that they wear, that are very immediately striking. So a lot of emphasis is placed on the texture of the clothes by Gentileschi in this painting, but the colors themselves are kind of dull. There's a dullness about the clothes. I think that is really remarkable, because what it says is that it's not about the fashion, it's about the personality. It's not about the superficiality and the looking beautiful at all costs, but also, but it's mostly about just the character of the woman. And I feel that this is a woman that's very empowered. Female empowerment is one of the reasons why her works are so praised to this day. So I'm not surprised at all. That's part of the beauty of Gentileschi's work, and part of the reason why she's celebrated to this day. I see that in this portrait, and you can definitely see that in this portrait. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that on the left-hand side of this painting, we see her signature and the date, so we know that it's her, and we know when she made it. But another two things that we need to single out are two symbols that are really cool. One, because they're closely related with history. We talked about Cleo as a woman, but given the fact that she is the Muse of History, there's two things that point out to that fact, but they're very subtle. Very subtle. Nothing in this painting is too in your face. One of them is a trumpet. She's holding a trumpet in her hand. Well, she's not holding it. I think she's just holding it upright. That's traditionally a symbol for fame. And then she's also wearing a laurel wreath. And that, of course, is a symbol of immortality, which we've seen time and time again in portraits of prominent figures of history, mythology, so on and so forth. That's a symbol of immortality. So history is closely related with fame and immortality, and that's how it's very simply represented, simply but effectively represented in this portrait, Cleo. As I mentioned, I feel a sense of female empowerment about this painting. That, of course, tells me a lot about her, who's, who must have been very ambitious, determined, and powerful. A person, an artist, and a woman. But we see that also in the portrait of Simone Vouet that I mentioned I would talk about a little bit at the end of this video, because, as I said, the fact that she was an important figure at the time, for the time, is shown by the fact that this portrait was commissioned by an important promoter of the arts from Pisa, whose name escapes me now. I didn't know him before, but he was quite an important figure in the art world at the time. And he commissioned Simone Vouet, who was a very important artist in the Roman territory, as I mentioned. In this portrait of Artemisia Gentileschi from 1622 to 25, something like that. She's 30 anyway, she's around 30 years old. And she's got a very intense look in her face. And we see that intensity, and we know that that's tribute to her strong character. But we also see that Vouet respects her, because at the bottom of the portrait, let's say in the bottom half of the portrait, we see him encapsulate the entirety of her creative process. On the one hand, she's holding a pencil, an old style pencil, and on the other hand, she's holding 6 paintbrushes and a color palette. So it's kind of cool to see that. Especially, it was kind of cool for me to see the portrait of Artemisia Gentileschi from an outsider's perspective, because she actually did do quite a few self-portraits throughout her career. Not quite a few, but we know of one or two or a couple that she did. She put herself in her own paintings and so on. But it's cool to get her portrait from an outsider's perspective. You know what I mean? Because that's how people saw her. So it's a different thing from how you see yourself. We know that in our everyday life. It was cool to see that, and then to see the work, a work of hers. So you get the creator and the creation side by side. So, thank you for watching. I hope I didn't babble on too much, and I hope that I kept it tight with this video, and that your mind didn't wander too much. I probably will be publishing this video quite a few days after I'll have left Pisa, but certainly, and left Italy as well. I'll be in Rotterdam in a couple of days. I'll be quite busy running around interviewing people who are guests at the International Film Festival in Rotterdam, but I'm still hoping to make a trip to one of the museums there. It'd be really cool to do something perhaps on an artist who isn't Italian. I realize that in these videos I've been talking about Italian painters, but hey, I've been in Italy, so, and I gotta say, Italian art is possibly that's when it comes to painting, that is my area of expertise. Well, I know a lot about art from different parts of the world too, but it would be more, I guess, a process of discovery that way than doing it on Italian art. I was born here. I grew up in Ireland, so. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. Join me next time when I talk about who knows. Ciao.